Hi, in this video I will show you how you can use Lucero for Blender. Lucero is meant to help you with setting up the lights, the compositing, the cameras and the rendering for your scene. In this video I will mostly focus on the light section of Lucero. To start with, if you happen to find a bug or you have any question or a suggestion for the add-on, you can come here on the corner at this button right here, and this will pop up your email client to directly send me an email, and here you can type whatever you have, a bug report, a question or a suggestion. If you want, you can manually send me an email at simonsanchez.art@gmail.com. So for the light section, what we have here is essentially a list that will show all the lights and light types of objects in your scene. In here we have different buttons that we can use to add lights. Let's say for example that we want to add a point light. You can set your 3D cursor on the scene and click the button right there. Let's go into render mode, and as you can see, there we have our point light. We can also add a sun lamp, we can add a spot, or an area light. For these three types of lights, the light will be aligned automatically to the direction of your camera on the viewport. So as you can see, it will automatically add it aligned to your viewport. Now here on the list we have the three different types of lights, and we can directly change the color of the light from here. We can also change the name. With this button you can select and automatically set active on your scene the light object. You can decide to enable or disable the light. And with this little diamond, you can choose to isolate the light. This will hide all the other lights and leave only the one you have isolated. You can click it again and that will show up the rest of the lights. Now, if you happen to add a light directly from the add menu, like so, then you might need to click the refresh button and this will show that light in the list. Apart from that, you can also search here for the lights based on the names and so on. So let's remove some of these lights. Another thing you can do with this button right here is to load all the lights from another blend file. In this case, I have this blend file prepared, which has two lights, and it has loaded those lights into our scene. The other type of light that you can add from here is an IES light, which is essentially a parametric light, which is defined by an IIS file. You can find this on the internet just by searching IIS light, and you will find different files that you can download for free. So you should select the file and you can load it in, and if you put it against a wall, we can clearly notice that this is a different type of light. And it will automatically set the name of the light based on the parameters of the file. If you add the light directly from Lucero, you can expand here this submenu. If you add the light from Blender, you will first have to click Convert to Lucero Light, and that way you will be able to show these settings. So the first thing you can do is to switch the type of light that you have. In this case, I'm going to keep it as a point light. You also have the position, you have the color of the light, and you have a button to set a random color. You can press backspace to reset it to white. You also have a control for the temperature of the light. And in here you have a multiplier for the temperature. If you press once, it's going to multiply the temperature. If you alt click, it's going to divide the temperature. And if you want a bigger step, you can press Ctrl or Ctrl Alt to divide with a bigger step. Again, backspace to reset it to white temperature. We have very much the same for the power. Choose a simple control for the power, and the same with a multiplier. And you also have a control to enable or disable the shadows. Some of the settings will only work on cycles. For example, here we have two sliders, one which is for the direct intensity of the light, and the other is for the bounce intensity of the light. So for example, if I set direct to 0, only the bounce information of the light will remain on the scene. If I set bow to 0, it's like you don't have any light at all. You can set this to 2 if you want extra bounce information. And again, direct information, you can set it like this, or maybe the other way around. We can set bounce to 0, and you will only have direct information of the light. And then from the main settings, the last one is choose the shadow softness, which is the radius of the light. These settings are pretty much the same for all the different types of lights. When you have a spot, you also have a control for the size and the blend of the spot. And when you have an area, you also have a control for the shape and size of the area. Before moving on onto the different settings, I wanted to tell you if you want to align your light to the camera, you can click Camera Align. This will automatically put you in an interactive model where you can move your view around with your middle mouse click, Control and mouse click to zoom in, and Shift and mouse click to pan around. And this is automatically aligning your light to the camera. Let's now take a look at the fall-off settings. In here you basically have a curve that will define how the camera intensity will fall off with the distance. You can set the range here, and maybe let me switch to a point light, which is going to be more clear. I can decrease the range to affect less of the scene. I can also choose to change the curvature of the fall-off. And if I want to get maybe a bit creative, I can create new points in here. And maybe switch this to constant and then play around with the range again. And that way I can get some pretty trippy effects. If I want to go back, I can set this to 10, reset the color ramp, and maybe flip the color ramp and set it like so. It might happen that you start to have a lot of lights in your list, and it might get a little bit difficult to manage all of this. What you can do is add your lights to collections, and here on filter you can choose each collection and it will show only the lights that you have inside of that collection. It also works for nested collections. In here, for example, I have the C collection that has a direct child and also another collection with 2 lights. If I choose C, I will see the 3 lights that are on C and the nested collection. And I can also choose C1 to only see these 2 lights. Once you remove lights, you might get this warning. You just click refresh and that will get rid of that. Let's take a look at how we can work with gobos in Lucero. Let's go into the gobos section. In this case, I have a spotlight. If you are trying to use a sun or an area lamp, you will get this warning. This mostly works on point and spotlights. In this dropdown, you will have different categories for different types of gobos. Let's say, for example, we want to add a window. We can choose click here and select the one that we want to use. And so we can see it more clearly, we can reduce the softness. And there we are going to have the shadow of our window. In here you will have different settings. You can choose to modify the intensity of the gobo. Again, the softness. You also have settings for the location, rotation, and the scale of the gobo. Once you scale a gobo, you can choose a different extension method. For example, in here we can choose repeat, and that will essentially dial the gobo inside the area of the light. In our current case, our gobos are black and white, but you can use any kind of image or video for a gobo, so you also have a control over the saturation of it. We also have support for animated gobos, which are essentially videos. For example, here we have a gobo for caustics. If I now press play, you will see that the gobo is moving. And then here we have a control for the speed of the animation. Of course, this is just a video, so if you reduce the speed, you will start to notice the frames of the videos. You can also increase it. And in here we have a control over the color ramp of the gobo. if you want to make something like this, or you want to keep all the detail of the gobo. Going back to Windows, if you press this button right here, you will get a random gobo from the current category you have selected. If you want to remove a gobo from the light, you can click this chain button right here. To open the folders where these gobos are stored, you can click this button right here. And this will open the folder of your current category. If you go one up, you will see all the folders for the different ones. You can of course make your own category in here. And in here you can drop different types of images. For example, I have a different MP4 for acoustics, and maybe some palms. And if I go back, I will have here my new category, and I can choose that acoustics or video with the palms. If you want, you can also add a gobo directly from Blender. You can just click the Add Gobo button, and in here we have a picture of Nicolas Cage. And this is mostly to showcase that you can use any type of image, and if you blur it enough, you can actually get some interesting effects. To make this more clear, I have a different picture here with more colors, and as you can see, we can get some very interesting results using any sort of image as a projection. We can now increase the intensity maybe, and we can play around with the saturation. If you want to remove a gobo, basically delete it from the folder, you can click delete gobo, and this will actually remove the file from your system. One thing to take into account is that this kind of gobo system currently only works on cycles. If you want to use gobos on Eevee, and let me switch to Eevee real quick, you will have to press this gobo button right here. And this will actually add a plane object. In here you can select the gobo when you have the plane object selected, and this will actually set up a material which is going to have some transparency, so you can actually, use the shadows of the gobos. This object is parented to the light, and you can control basically the object to change how it will affect the scene. Let's take a look at the other type of objects that we have in here. In this case, we also have a blocker, which is essentially a plane that won't be visible on the render, and this allows you to block the light in case you want to simulate some shadows. So for example, you can take this plane and maybe remove some faces, and like so you have your object to simulate your custom shadows. Apart from that, we also have a softbox. This is essentially a plane that will receive the light and is going to block it a bit. The main purpose of this is to essentially make a very soft light setup for your scene. Here in the softbox settings, you can choose if you want to show it or not on the render, or you want it to affect the diffuse, or also the glossy. Let's now take a look at the final type of object. In this case, it's the image type. You can click here and select any sort of image. This will create a plane with the image that you selected. And here in the settings, you will have two different types of intensities for the emission. You will have one intensity for what will be considered the foreground of the image, and also an intensity for the background. This part down here controls which parts are considered foreground or background. So if you move it to the right, only the brightest parts of the image will be considered foreground, and if you move it to the left, more parts of the image will be considered a foreground. And of course, you also have a control over the saturation. This essentially allows you to use any sort of image as an emission of light. You can have a cityscape on the background, or maybe a neon sign, or a shopfront that you want to use lights with. Or maybe you have the lights of a car that you want to use an image with. The more you work on projects, you will expand your library of assets. These assets can include HDRs, gobos, or presets for the compositor. If you don't want to lose this data, you have this button right here. Once you click it, you can select any folder, export data, and this will create this Lucero data folder. Inside of here, you will have all of your compositor presets, all of your gobos, all of your HDRs, and as well the rendering presets. This is useful maybe if you update Blender or you update the add-on or you need to use another PC, you can take all of your assets with you very quickly. And that will be the end of this video. In the next video, we will take a look at the interactive light editor.